You know that strange noise you hear at night? The one you try to convince yourself is just the house settling? Well, for the Bowen family in 1986, those noises were just the start of a waking nightmare. They thought their home was haunted, but the truth was so much worse. It wasn't a ghost making those sounds. It was a teenage boy, and he was living inside their walls. His dark obsession with their daughter would lead to one of the most infamous triple homicides the state had ever seen. This is the chilling true story of Daniel LaPlante, an awkward teen who turned a suburban home into his personal house of horrors before his reign of terror escalated to an unimaginable level of brutality. It's a story that blurs the line between a ghost story and a true crime nightmare. A real-life horror film that played out in the quiet towns of Pepperell and Townsend, Massachusetts. What happened there would scar two families forever and serve as a haunting reminder that sometimes the real monsters are all too human. In the late fall of 1986, the house at 93 Lawrence Street in Pepperell, Massachusetts, was a place of quiet sadness. Frank Bowen, a single father, was doing his best to raise his two daughters, Tina and her younger sister, after the recent painful loss of his wife. Grief was a heavy blanket in the home, a silent ghost that followed them from room to room. But soon, another presence would make itself known. And this one wasn't silent at all. It started small, a soft thud from an empty room, a faint scratching sound.
Dad, did you hear that?
One of the girls might whisper in the night.
It's just the house settling, sweetie.
Frank would say, trying to soothe them.
Old houses make noise.
But it didn't stop. The activity grew bolder. One morning, they'd come downstairs to find chairs rearranged. Another time, the TV was on, casting a ghostly glow in an empty living room. They started to wonder if the spirit of their deceased mother was still with them. In a strange way, it was a comforting thought, a sign she hadn't really left. But that comfort was about to curdle into pure terror. The disturbances went from mischievous to menacing. Food started disappearing. Then came the messages. Pig was scrawled on a wall in what looked like shaving cream. The idea that this was their mother's loving spirit was getting harder and harder to believe. This felt malicious. Fear began to seep into the Bowen home. The girls were terrified.
I don't want to sleep alone.
One would plead, jumping at every creak. Frank, trying to be the rational anchor, would check the locks, search the basement and attic, but always found nothing.
There's a reasonable explanation for all this,
he'd insist, though even he felt the constant unnerving sensation of being watched. The activity seemed to focus on Tina. She would hear her name whispered from the shadows.
Tina.
The tapping sounds followed her, a sinister Morse code meant only for her. Caught in a spiral of fear, the family started holding séances. They'd sit in the dark calling out.
Mom, are you here with us? Please tap once for yes, twice for no.
And in the oppressive silence, they'd hear it.
Oh my God, Frank. She's here.
They were communicating with something, but it wasn't who they thought it was. The entity they were speaking to was 16-year-old Daniel LaPlante. Born on May 15, 1970, he was an awkward local kid who never quite fit in. He had a history of burglaries and unsettling behavior, but no one could have imagined this. LaPlante had developed a dark, possessive obsession with Tina Bowen. He hadn't just broken into the Bowen house, he had moved in. LaPlante discovered a narrow 6-inch wide crawl space hidden behind a bathroom cabinet. This became his secret home. From this hidden nest, he began his campaign of terror. He wasn't a ghost, he was a voyeur. He created a network of tunnels and peepholes, removing outlets and drilling tiny holes so he could watch the family's every move, completely undetected. He watched them eat. He watched them sleep. The full extent of his violation was sickening. He'd emerge when the family was out, raiding their fridge. He moved their furniture and turned on their electronics to create the illusion of a haunting. The tapping on the walls during the séances? That was Daniel LaPlante, listening from the other side, playing a cruel game with a grieving family. Perhaps the most disturbing detail was his desecration of the mother's memory. He would sneak into her empty bedroom, open her closet, and put on her clothes and makeup. He would walk through the dark house in a grotesque parody of the woman they had lost. For months, the house at 93 Lawrence Street was no longer a home. It was a cage, and the monster was already inside. By December 1986, the psychological torment had pushed the Bowen family to the brink. They were prisoners in their own home. But the illusion of a supernatural haunting was about to be shattered. On the evening of December 8th, the game changed. Daniel LaPlante decided to reveal himself. He emerged from the shadows not as a ghost, but as a figure of pure menace. He wore a bizarre costume. His face was caked in makeup. He had on a Native American-style jacket, and a ninja mask hid his identity. In his hands, he carried a hatchet and a large wrench. "Don't scream," he commanded, confronting the terrified family. He forced Frank and his two daughters into a bedroom. The nightmare was now horribly real. The unseen force that had toyed with them for months stood before them, a flesh and blood monster. He tied them up, his intentions unknown but clearly sinister. For Tina, the object of his obsession, the terror must have been beyond words. The boy she knew from town was now her captor. In a moment of incredible bravery, Tina saw an opportunity. While LaPlante was distracted, she managed to wiggle free.
Don't!
Frank pleaded, but she didn't hesitate. She ran to the second-story window, threw it open, and leaped into the cold December air. She landed hard, injured but alive. She scrambled to her feet and ran to a neighbor's house.
Help!
She screamed, bursting through their door.
There's a man in our house, and he has our family!
The frantic call sent a shockwave through the local police department. Officers swarmed the quiet street, surrounding the house. They managed to make contact, and facing an overwhelming police presence, LaPlante's resolve crumbled. The officers successfully got Frank and the other daughter out of the house, shaken but physically unharmed. The immediate crisis was over, but the mystery was just beginning. Police conducted a thorough search of the house. They found nothing.
"He's vanished,"
an officer said, stumped.
"How could someone disappear from a house completely surrounded?"
For 2 days, police were baffled. Then, an officer noticed something odd about a bathroom cabinet. On a hunch, he moved it. Behind it, he found the entrance to Daniel LaPlante's secret world. A small opening leading into the narrow void between the walls. And it was in this claustrophobic space that they finally found him. Curled up in the darkness was 16-year-old Daniel LaPlante. He had never left the house. While police searched, he had been just inches away, listening. The discovery was shocking. As police pulled the teen from the wall, the horrifying picture of the past few months snapped into focus. The hauntings, the whispers, it had all been him. He was charged as a juvenile for home invasion, kidnapping, and assault. The ghost had been unmasked, and the community of Pepperell breathed a sigh of relief. The nightmare, it seemed, was over. But for another family, in the neighboring town of Townsend, the nightmare was just about to begin. Daniel LaPlante's time in juvenile detention was shockingly brief. He was held until October of 1987, when, in a decision that would have catastrophic consequences, he was released. His mother, desperate to have her son home, had posted his $10,000 bail. At 17 years old, Daniel LaPlante was free. He went back to live with his mother and stepfather. Shortly after his release, he began committing a series of burglaries, gathering supplies and stealing weapons. On October 14, 1987, he broke into a neighbor's home and stole .222 caliber firearms. When his stepfather later found one of the guns hidden in his laundry, he confronted him.
Daniel, what is this?
I bought it.
LaPlante coolly claimed. The lie was accepted, and a crucial chance to intervene was lost. Just half a mile through the woods from LaPlante's home lived the Gustafson family. Andrew Gustafson was a loving husband and father. His wife Priscilla, 33, was a beloved nursery school teacher who was pregnant with their third child. Their two children, 7-year-old Abigail and 5-year-old William, filled their home with joy. They were completely unaware of the shadow creeping towards them. On December 1, 1987, armed with one of the stolen handguns, LaPlante broke into the Gustafson home again. This time, he wasn't there to steal. Sometime after he entered, Priscilla Gustafson returned home with her youngest child, 5-year-old William. What happened next is a chronicle of unimaginable horror. LaPlante confronted Priscilla, forcing her into the master bedroom where he bound and gagged her before brutally assaulting her. After the assault, he made a cold, calculated decision. He couldn't leave a witness. He took a pillow, pressed it against Priscilla's head, and shot her twice. Priscilla Gustafson, a mother, wife, teacher, and woman carrying a new life, was dead. But the horror wasn't over. LaPlante then took little William to an upstairs bathroom. There, he drowned him in the bathtub. While LaPlante was still in the house, a school bus pulled up outside. 7-year-old Abigail Gustafson walked up to her front door, completely unaware. LaPlante grabbed her as she entered, dragged her to a downstairs bathroom, and drowned her, just as he had her little brother. Around 5:30 p.m., Andrew Gustafson returned home to an eerily silent house.
Scylla? Kids, I'm home.
He called out, but there was no answer. He went upstairs to the master bedroom and found Priscilla. The sight was so horrific, he let out a scream of pure anguish. In a later interview, he recalled the moment.
I was too afraid of going to look for my children because I was afraid I'd find them dead. It was so shocking and unbelievable. I screamed, I wailed.
His worst fears were confirmed moments later. He called the police, his voice breaking with incomprehensible grief. The details of this case are incredibly difficult to process, and they highlight the devastating impact one person's actions can have. If you find this kind of in-depth analysis important for understanding the complexities of criminal psychology and the justice system, please consider subscribing. Your support helps us continue to shed light on these important stories and ensure the victims are never forgotten. Now, let's return to the investigation and the hunt for a killer. The scene at the Gustafson home was one of unparalleled brutality. The investigation began immediately, with immense pressure to find the person responsible. Suspicion fell on Daniel LaPlante almost instantly. His recent history with the Bowen family made him the prime suspect. On December 2, 1987, police held a press conference.
We are seeking 17-year-old Daniel LaPlante as the primary suspect in the murders,
an official announced. His face was plastered everywhere. As troopers descended on his mother's house, LaPlante fled into the woods. A massive manhunt was launched, with helicopters and canine units. The evidence was mounting. Sneaker prints in the snow outside the Gustafson home matched LaPlante's shoes. On the run, LaPlante grew more desperate. His flight led him back to Pepperell, where he briefly took 2 women hostage and forced one to drive him in her van. The woman managed to escape and alert the authorities. Now in a stolen vehicle, LaPlante was spotted in the nearby town of Ayr. Police closed in, cornering him in a lumberyard. He abandoned the van and fled on foot, making a final desperate act to crawl into a large industrial dumpster. This time, there was no escape. On December 3rd, just 48 hours after the manhunt began, police surrounded the lumberyard.
Get out of the dumpster! Hands where I can see them!
They shouted. They pulled him out from the garbage. The boy who hid in walls was found hiding in trash. He was reportedly laughing hysterically as officers took him into custody. During the search, they made a chilling discovery. He had another stolen firearm hidden in his pants. Search warrants executed at LaPlante's home solidified the case. They found items stolen from the Gustafson home, the murder weapon, and matching bullets. The most damning piece of physical evidence, however, was found on LaPlante himself. On his sock, investigators discovered a single strand of hair belonging to 7-year-old Abigail Gustafson, an undeniable link between the killer and his victim. At trial, LaPlante's defense argued he was not guilty by reason of insanity, a claim the court rejected. On October 25, 1988, after just 5 hours of deliberation, the jury found Daniel LaPlante guilty on 3 counts of first-degree murder. He showed no emotion as the verdict was read, but as he was let out, the spectators broke into applause. The judge handed down 3 mandatory and consecutive life sentences, ensuring he would never again be a free man. Daniel LaPlante was sent to a maximum security prison. Over the years, he showed little remorse. But in 2012, the legal landscape changed. The U.S. Supreme Court ruled that mandatory life sentences without parole for juveniles were unconstitutional. This opened the door for LaPlante to be resentenced. In 2017, Daniel LaPlante appeared in court, now a middle-aged man. For the first time, he expressed sorrow, stating,
"I do not have the words to fully express my profound sorrow, but I am truly sorry for the harm that I've caused."
Priscilla Gustafson's family didn't believe him. A forensic psychiatrist agreed, finding that he still lacked genuine empathy. The judge called his crimes 3 distinct and brutal murders, and reimposed the 3 consecutive life sentences, but with the possibility of parole after 45 years. This means LaPlante won't be eligible for a parole hearing until he is at least 62 years old. The case of Daniel LaPlante remains one of the most disturbing in modern true crime history. It's a story that starts with violating a family's sanctuary and ends with annihilating another. The urban legend of someone living in the walls became a horrifying reality for the Bowen family. And for the Gustafsons, the failure of the justice system to keep a known predator locked away resulted in a tragedy that echoes to this day. The walls of 93 Lawrence Street no longer hold their dark secret, but the memory of Priscilla, Abigail, and William Gustafson serves as a permanent, heartbreaking reminder of the lives that were lost. What do you think about the court's decision to grant him the possibility of parole? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into the cases that shake our understanding of human nature.